Hello and welcome to Risky Bitness. Today I have a real gem for you. Exact, the art of the visual stage for the Super Famicom, or as we like to call it in the West, the Super Nintendo. If you haven't heard of this title, it's probably because it was only released in Japan. However, it had enough of a following in the West to be translated into several languages by fans, and was recommended to me years ago as a must-play Japan-only title. Exact is an action RPG that immediately reminded me of the E-series, or Lagoon, if Lagoon didn't totally suck. Anyway, so why is it called Art of the Visual Stage? I have absolutely no idea. You would think there would be some kind of theatrical theme with an undertitle like that, but there's no theme like that here at all. In fact, despite the compelling name and box art, Exact is very much a standard 16-bit fantasy action RPG. So what stands out about this game that it needs to be talked about in a video? Well, it's a great question and there are several compelling answers, but let's start out with this one. Exact is a port of a game that was originally released for the NEC PC8801 and PC9801, home computers that were released for the Japanese market, and the predecessor to the PC Engine, which we in the West call TurboGrafx-16. This was the breakout title for Microcabin, a small Japanese developer who is best known for Frey and Magical Adventure, Illusion City, Mystaria, The Realms of Lore, and the Kotetsu no Hoko series. The Super Famicom is also not the only console to which this game was ported. It was released with upgraded graphics on the MSX, Sharp 68K, and even the PC Engine. In fact, the game and its first sequel were released as a single retail box for the PC ECD, with added video cutscenes. It was also released for mobile phones and Windows. Those versions are kind of hard to come by today. There was an official English translation for the MSX version as early as 2007, and there were several sequels to this game, so it looks like it was at least to some degree a very successful game. Why was Exact so popular? Well, it's simply an excellent example of a genre, and it was highly praised for its story and music. It received favorable reviews from Famitsu, and the music was praised as being ahead of its time, as was the game's visual style and gameplay. As with many such Japan-only titles, there isn't a lot of background info on this game that I can find on the web in English, so unfortunately we won't be able to dive too deep into the development history. What we do know is that the Super Famicom version was ported by Sunsoft and released in 1993. Now typically when computer games were ported to consoles in this era, the console version usually wasn't that good, but in this case, Exact actually has a number of improvements, including better graphics and music than its predecessors. The game looks great and sounds even better, and it's probably got one of the best soundtracks I've heard on the Super Nintendo, which is saying a lot for a system that is known for having some banger soundtracks on it. The music was composed by Yuji Sasai and Tadahiro Nitta. Sasai is best known for Final Fantasy Legend III and Final Fantasy Mystic Quest, but also composed for Bushido Blade 2, Rudra no Hiho, and Tobal No. 1, among others. Sasai is also a bassist and has played in the rock bands Novella and Action. Nitta was a founding member of Microcabin. I can't find a lot of info about him on the web, but according to the Moby Games database, he has worked on music for Shenmue, the MSX port of Final Fantasy, and a few other titles that I'm not familiar with. There's an active musician by this name, but I'm not sure if it's the same guy. I asked the guy on Twitter if it's him, we'll see if he responds. In any case, this version of the game suffers tremendously in one way. It ends halfway through the game. Yeah, that's right. This port of Exact contains only half of the original game. Because we don't know the exact reason for sure, we can only speculate. Maybe it was due to the limited memory storage of cartridges at the time, and they didn't have the time or budget to expand the memory by using more ROM banks. It could be due to the time constraints and just not finishing the whole game by the deadline, which would be a really bizarre and lazy way to release a game. Whatever the reason, this game can be completed in about 5 to 6 hours, so maybe a decent weekend rental. Who knows, maybe they originally had planned on releasing 2 parts for this game and they just never released the second part. The story of Exak tells of a demon named Bado, who was trapped behind a wall of ice after being defeated by Duel, the god of war. After 250 years, an unknown person has broken the wall of ice. Monsters in the service of Badu have begun to appear in the world. You play the role of Latak, a descendant of Duel. Man, the names of the characters in this game are just awful, but wait, they're gonna get worse. A pixie comes from the village of Fearless looking for your father, the unfortunately named Dork. Yes, the man's name is Dork. But finding out he's been missing for some time, she decides that his son is just going to have to do. Soon a series of events unfolds, and Latak finds himself in search of the gems that will provide him with the power of Exak to defeat Bado. By the way, I have no idea if I'm pronouncing Exak correctly. Is it supposed to be Zack? I don't know. Crossack? No idea. I'm saying Exak. I had no idea what to expect when I started playing this game, and I was blown away by the opening cutscene, which seemed to be years ahead of its time. If I didn't know any better, I could have sworn this was a CD-ROM game. Is it possible that this originally was intended to be released for the ill-fated SNES CD add-on? That would definitely explain the game being cut in half. Characters who are important to the story have large anime-style portraits on their dialogue boxes, and that adds some flair to the game's already impressive visuals. In terms of gameplay, it feels very much like an ease game. The player can walk right up to an NPC and that'll start talking. They can even bump enemies just by walking into them. What's weird about that is when you bump into the enemies, it makes this really annoying sound. When you take damage, it actually sounds kind of nice, so I really wish those sound effects would be reversed. It is wonderful that you can easily move in 8 directions. Many games of this era and style didn't allow for diagonal movement. This helps you navigate through the areas very quickly and easily. In classic action RPG fashion, you can equip an item or spell to an active slot and press Y to use it, while pressing B to attack enemies with your sword. By simply standing still, you can block all frontal attacks with your shield. It took some practice to get used to fighting in this game. Every enemy has an angle from which you can attack them without being damaged yourself, and you have to experiment to find the right one. Some enemies won't even take damage from the sword at all. You can defeat them with magic, or have your sword enchanted at the village magic shop. Items can be prohibitively expensive, but you can heal simply by standing still for a few seconds. This comes in handy, but whew, it takes a long time and you can get real impatient after a while. The gameplay sections are large with several directions in which the player can go, and it's basically an overworld map linked together by towns. And of course, every time you arrive at a new town, you begin the next chapter in the story. Early in the game, I found myself getting lost and grinding for a really long time before I finally looked up a gameplay walkthrough and found out that I just didn't see the place where I was supposed to walk over to the next screen in one area. So that might be a bit of a design flaw if it was that hard to tell by a veteran gamer. But once I found that out, it was all smooth sailing from there. Grinding has diminishing returns though, because enemy XP scales to your level. So the higher level you are, the less XP you get for defeating the enemies. Of course, the hero takes huge leaps in power from one level to another, so enemies that were pummeling you just a few minutes ago will become cannon fodder very quickly. You'll need to grind out levels in order to purchase new weapons and armor also, and the shopkeeper won't sell it to you unless you meet the level requirements. The shops don't show you how a weapon, armor, or shield will affect your stats, but the layout makes it very straightforward. Items are laid out from weakest on the left to strongest on the right. Dungeons are large and the layout can be confusing. On top of that, there's no in-game map. This is definitely a game where I suggest using graph paper to map both the overworld and dungeon areas. Many of the game's storyline quests will have you running around back and forth quite a lot. Most likely it's just a way of disguising the grinding. It can get a little bit tedious sometimes, especially in dungeons when you start to feel real-world fatigue. But if you get stuck in this game, try talking to an NPC more than once. A lot of times they have more to say, and there's nothing in the game that's going to tell you that. You just have to keep trying it. Boss enemies are ridiculously powerful. They can easily kill you in one hit, and it takes you a lot of hits to kill them, even if you're overleveled. So the strategy is extremely important in those encounters, and it can take a few tries to deal with any of the bosses. Luckily, you can save anywhere, and when you die, you just start over from the nearest area. You don't lose gold or XP, so you're safe to screw up. The UI and menus are very simple here, with your life bar displayed at all times and the menus being a simple text interface. It's no frills, but it's easy to navigate. I enjoyed playing XAC, although I was pretty bummed that it wasn't the full game. I may try the MSX or PCE CD versions at some point. Would you like to see videos on those? If so, please let me know in the comments below. Hey, do me a favor, please like the video, subscribe, enable notifications so you'll get more content like this. And for my next video, I'll be resuming my Beat 'em Up City series, where I'm going to take an in-depth look at classic arcade title Night Slashers, a beat 'em up where instead of your standard street punks, the enemies are vampires, werewolves, and zombies. Until next time, game over.